Welcome everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to start this workshop about design system and systemic design. It's my first time here with Codemotion, so I'm pretty happy about that. And I will switch off my camera and I will start soon as I think we are like 16 participants, so it's like, for me, we can start. So we're gonna save time for questions. Okay, so first of all, who am I? And I would say that, like, I have multiple hats, as everybody can right now. So I teach design in a university, Polytechnico di Milano, and like my subject is specifically user experience design. I'm like the CIO of a design studio, and we have 3 offices in Rome, Milan, and Berlin. I also work for the European Commission, and I would also teach in other places. But the subject of the evening is the difference between design systems and systemic design. So I'm going to start with design system, and then we're going to switch to systemic design. So looking at that picture, the first thing I wanna clarify is the meaning of design patterns. So look at that deal. How many ways we have to walk and to pass the hill? Like a lot, because even maybe you can spot a gate, but you cannot spot like a specific path. So it's putting 10 different people on that situation, asking them to go beyond the hill, maybe we will have like 10 different paths or 10 different, walk sides. And this is different because even if this is not a real street, it's like a path. But by the way, the affordance of what you perceive around you could give you a hint. Maybe to reach that specific point, you can walk close to that super tiny path. So what we call the design part, we need to say thank you to Christopher Alexander, who was an architect, because he was like the inventor of design pattern as an expression. And he said that each pattern like describes a problem, and we face that problem over and over again in our environment. It could be in the physical world, in the digital world. And by the way, the pattern is also the core of the solution. So we can use the problem, we can like face the problem, and having the core of a solution, we can use the same pattern in different ways, but so we still have the solutions coming from that pattern as something in common. That was the book, A Pattern Language. It's all about towns, buildings. It's all about architecture. Jennifer Tidwell, who is an interaction designer or user interface designer, he wrote a book about digital design pattern, and still like the elements are habitability, or the patterns are something that make things easier to understand to us, or more useful or usable. So there's still common solution to what she's defined as design tensions. So let's make an example. How do people can understand where to go, like in a space? Like imagine in a space like that. So the physical world is full of pattern. For example, the arrow is a pattern. This is the Tokyo Underground. We see the arrow. The arrow is a pattern of direction. So you have a direction and you have also like a specific way. We can use the arrow pattern in lots of ways. Those are still arrows. They are different, of course. Still, they are pointing directions in big spaces. It's not like an underground, or it's not like a door. And we also have like those patterns, like what the name of this place, or other patterns like maps. Everything here seems to belong to the physical world, but we can use the same language. So what's the design pattern for digital interfaces that can say to you where you are, like the brand place, the URL, the logo, anything, the page title. So considering a simple page, breadcrumbs, is a design pattern. You can use breadcrumbs across a lot of different, design systems. So the breadcrumbs is the name of the design pattern, and we can find breadcrumbs even here, for example, in the file system, or we can find breadcrumbs here in the old version of iTunes and even in the newer one. So speaking about directions, so what's the digital like solution according to the same pattern? The main navigation. So the navigation elements, the lists, the drop-down menus, shifting bar, tabs, anything is like, of course, like navigation bars are totally different across different, ecosystem and different systems, but the core solution, I have a place where I have a lot of labels together, and those labels are going to tell me where I can go is the design pattern. Then something that I just want to clarify, just to be quick, is that the design pattern depends a lot on conventions. So for example, I found that on a door of a toilet in Germany, and imagine that you are like in a toilet and you have like the sun and the moon. Like according to my culture as an Italian, like the moon is a female world and the sun is a male world. So I entered into the sun and I found a woman, because like in Germany is the opposite. Like the sun is a female world and the moon is a male world. So it's pretty patterns can be pretty awkward, across different cultures. The second, I think, concept that I want to introduce to you is the components. So any journey, we can according to different granularity, we can perceive any journey as like a flow, and we can divide flows, for example, in web design into across pages, and any page can have like components. Any components that is made by like a lot of elements. This is pretty close to what we call atomic design or modular design. So a component is a reusable building block for a consistent interface. And sometimes we call a component a module or a page chunk or a portlet or a widget, whatever. Like I could say that, for example, in the Facebook ecosystem, the card with a message is a component, or like that one is a component, and we have different like variations of different components. So moving from component to pattern, like is an abstraction. As you can see, we have different video players from YouTube, Apple website, and Vimeo. They are different. So components are different. Even the controls that you have are different, but they belong to the same pattern, like the video player pattern. And of course, shifting from patterns to component is when you like create an instance of an object. So the tab navigation is a design pattern, and we can have different tab navigations. It could be web-based, it could be like our browser with our tabs, whatever. So just to close that clarification, I think is needed. Pattern, I met in my life some pretty senior designer. They had a bad perception about the difference between patterns and components, and that's pretty weird in terms of experience and seniority. So patterns are generic solutions, and components, they belong to a specific design system. Okay, patterns, they don't have like a look and feel. They don't have a style. They don't have like a specific copy. But components, they do. They have a tone of voice. They have a specific look and feel. They are part of a specific design. Okay, so the design library, sometimes called pattern library, but pattern library is a full friend because it's not a library of patterns. It's a library of components. A design library is like the collection of, is a structured collection of all the components in a specific design system. And I would say that the term system is much more reliable and clear rather than library, because the library is just tiny piece of the system. You know, there is a lot more. Like there's the governance of the library, the policies, how we can update the library, who can update the library, how many elements do we have in the library, how we can, you know, use labels in the library, and so on. So that's why I use design system, and the whole design community is shifting from library to design system. And the design system is something unique. So you have components, you have rules, and those rules make design teams or product teams like profitable. So they agree around something, they have a common language, they have a common governance, so they can work together. An example, this is not design systems are not new. They don't belong to the digital. Like the signs that you see on the roads, like are made by a system. You have, you know, rules, guidelines, and then you have variations. So you have the blue signs in Italy, and you have the red signs. So what we do for like digital interfaces is that we use the same concept of the library, and then we describe the governance, and then we describe the rules. So we use the design system as an element that can make team, they can align team together. So according to, starting from the typography sides is what we call the primitives, you know, the colors, the typography sizes, the types, moving, you know, from the palette to the components, to the small components. This is, I think that was like our redesign of like a famous newspaper in Italy. So variations of components, a big one with the signature like of the journalist, a big one without the signature, a big one without the signature or without the abstract, and so on. You start designing the primitives, then you move to the components, and then you have the overall design system. This is another example we made for like a real estate client. This is pretty famous. Is the design system. The name of the design system here is Glue. Is the Spotify design system, and Spotify is pretty famous because they have a team dedicated to the maintenance and to the governance of the design system. Like yesterday morning, I was in Berlin speaking with the head of design ops in Zalando, and she said to me, "Yeah, like we started 6 months ago, and now we have a team, a dedicated team, 7 people. They just work, maintain, upgrade the Zalando unique design system." So the system is not just the pattern, like the system as a governance. It needs to be official, it needs to be adaptable, it needs to be maintainable. System is not just visual, system is also copy, system is also like, it could be code components. So it's used by coders, it's used by visual designers, it's used by marketing, it's used by people who belongs to the content team. So it's like the common stain that we look together when we work to the same product or in the same ecosystem, because the idea of the design system is to be able to convey the values of like a big ecosystem across any device and across any touch point. Still here, I see like something that I met like 15 years ago, like Andrew Payne was, I think, the first coder trying to document any code components of the Sun.com ecosystem. He made the design system 15 years ago in CSS and HTML. And now, as I said before, we have the Spotify Glue. The Spotify design system is open. You can go to spotify.com glue and see all the building blocks, all the patterns, all the essential, and then you can build your own Spotify interface according to the system. Yelp has like another pretty famous open design system, Lonely Planets. There are a lot. And by the way, the more design systems are connected with code, so the more they are not just visual, but just overall design system, the more the system itself needs maintenance and needs, you know, a community, rules. And that's why even like the pretty big design system right now, they are used as a repository. So, for example, there are a lot of design systems that are like maintained under a version control system. Okay, so we spent the first 15 minutes together discussing what's a design pattern, what is a component, what is a design library, what is a design system. Now, way to switch, because design systems are not systemic design. So what is systemic design? What do we mean? Like in, not just in academia, even, you know, in the everyday work, when a client asks you to design a system. So it's not just a set of components and a set of rules. Like we can say that systemic design is it's a new field, of course, in academia. It's a field, like it's a discipline combining what we call design thinking and system thinking. So let's start with systemic design. So the idea is that, for example, in the design faculty where I teach in Milan, we have like a pretty, let's say, ambitious course. The name of the course is PSSD, so Product, Service, and System Design. Because until, let's say, 10 years ago, like the design fields were divided according to the artifact, so to the output of the design activity. So product design is like, okay, you're a designer and you realize a product, or service designer, you're a designer and you realize a service. You design, you know, processes and procedures. So for example, you can redesign like a new way to handle money, like, you know, the future of banks. We have lots of investments in fintech right now. But what's the difference between designing a product, a service, or a system? How we can redesign something like healthcare? How we can redesign something like, you know, education? It's not a service, and education is not a product. It's a system. Like, and systemic design and systemic thinking is the branch of the academia knowledge that since 1950, like 50 years ago, they started discussing complexity, value conflicts, and ambiguity. So, of course, it's pretty across a lot of disciplines, and there's like a part of organization studies, coming from an economic background. There's a lot of social sciences involved, and a lot of even cultural studies. So it's something pretty new for the academia. The idea is that we can use the design process and the design mindset, even not just to build, as I said before, like products or services, but even to innovate and to facilitate change of impacts in a systemic way. So we can say that design thinking is a mindset. It's not a toolbox, and you have a lot of action, but the idea is that still human-centered, but the idea is to bring continuous innovation and change into like an orchestration of product, services, and big ecosystems. So what I wanna this is not like a webinar about design system. This is going to be, or design thinking is going to be so big. So what I want to say is that what I want to spot is that is the intention. So for any designer, deciding what is the problem on the table, what we want to face. So for example, let's imagine that we want to change healthcare. How many opportunities do we have in an ecosystem like healthcare? Only the prioritization that we do. We can say, for example, we want to change that tiny aspect or that aspect. The prioritization that we do it's a point of view. So came from our intention. Like is not the artifact, is not the result of the design process, is the starting point. Our decision to take maybe challenge 1 and not challenge 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's a situated choice. So what is interesting in combining design thinking and systematic thinking is that, you know, in a systemic point of view, even if you change a pretty tiny piece into an ecosystem, you're going to change the whole ecosystem, because the complexity theory, it's totally connected to two important concepts: interdependence. So the parts are interdependent. So even if I change something, let's say, even if I change A, I'm going to have an impact on B, C, D, E, F. Okay? How the parts can give themselves reciprocal influence and independence. So if we have parts that don't have that kind of dependence. So in the idea of complexity, we cannot divide a big problem into 4 tiny problems. It's impossible, because any problem needs to be taken as a complex whole. That's the complexity theory. So how might we as designers redesign big ecosystem without dividing those big ecosystem into like a long list of small opportunities, but considering them as a whole? This is what we call like systemic design. And of course, there are conferences, there are papers, there are a lot of books, but still is something that I feel is new, even for the academia. And what I can say to you, like, I don't wanna, let's say, I think the best way to use our time is to get your questions, is that I want to show to you that picture is the Cynefin framework. It was created by 1999, so 20 years ago, by Dave Snowden, which is not the Snowden that we know. he worked for IBM Global Services, and Cynefin is a Welsh word for habitat. Is the Welsh word to say habitat. So he said, okay, starting from right and bottom, sometimes we face ecosystems that are ruled by the obvious laws. For example, if I do, like, if I remove my laptop, the webinar is going to be over. Okay, so in that specific field, we have the best rules. We know what we have to do. So if I throw something, if I throw a piece of glass, that glass is gonna broken, like on my carpet. And sometimes, as designers or as any professional, we deal with ecosystems that are ruled by the obvious laws. What we have to do over there is just to sense, understand what's going on, and respond. But by the way, we have a list of good, not just good practice, but the best practice. The best thing to do is that one, because the ecosystem, the relationship between cause and effects is pretty obvious. Then we have complicated ecosystem. In a complicated ecosystem, if I do something like, if I do A, it could be that A has an impact to B and then has an impact to C. So it's not so immediate to understand the cause-effect chain. So what I can do is that I sense, I collect data, I analyze data, and then I respond. So we don't have best practices here. We have good practices. We know that maybe if we do something on A, we will generate an impact on C. It's complicated. This is when we say, okay, this is not so easy, it's complicated. Still, we can manage the ecosystem. Still, we can understand the cause-effect relationship. Moving on the top left, in a complex ecosystem, the relationship and the interdependence between cause and effects are too much. Still, it will be possible to get the whole, but they are too much. So A has an effect on B, who has an effect on C, who has an effect on D, who has an effect on... So we cannot collect the data because it's even impossible to sense. So what we have to do is that we try something, we probe, then we measure the difference, and then we can, assess a response. Is the domain where we have emergent practices, experiments. We can do experiments. Before Newton, we didn't know the laws of the nature. So we do experiment. We try something, we see what happens, and then we say, okay, maybe, okay, that has an influence on that, and that has an influence on that. And in the bottom left, in a chaotic ecosystem where everything doesn't make sense, when it's even impossible to try something, you don't try. You just do something and you invest a lot, even trying to understand the consequences of your doing. So he said, here we don't have best practice or good practice, we have novel practice, something completely new. And until we do something that it's able to transform a chaotic ecosystem into a complex, we cannot handle, the ecosystem of chaos. Wow, that was long. I hope that I was clear enough. And I'm gonna finish with the laws of systemic design. So the first is pretty simple. Like the world is changing every day, every second, every moment. Ecosystems are not something fixed. So, for example, banking was something, pretty, let's say, complicated until like 10 years ago, and now seems to be complex, and it could be a chaos like in a couple of months. So I don't want to use examples about politics. I don't want to use examples about other countries. But what we have around us is is pretty clear that at any time the idea of having what Lenin said the equilibrium. So it's a balance. It's challenging. So of course, this continuous change as a part of what we can say emergent novelty. So some changes are just something that we do to make something better, or something that we do to make something new. But still there's a lot of stuff that is not intentional. So there's a lot of stuff that happens, and which is, as this Snowden guy said before, novel practice. So emergent novelty. What we can do as designers of systems is to be open at every stage of our project to redesign. So every design is provisional, every design is temporary. So you start a project today, you have a project of 6 months, you interview people, you get some data, you have an idea in your mind, and you start designing. As soon as you put something tangible into the world and you spot the differences, maybe the world is not the same of 2 months ago. Maybe even your research is not valid anymore. So any design, any artifact, any tentative to make sense, it's provisional. And we need to stay open to redesign at every step of a project. So all the systemic design projects are entangled. I love the idea of entangled with social systems. And this is, this is so bold, and I love so much that sentence, because the idea is that we don't have anything which is like nature or just technical. Even in a API connection between two systems, the APIs, the methods, and the request are like coded by people right now. So even the way those machines communicate by themselves has an intention behind it. That intention is connected to a social system, so to the groups of people belonging to two different companies who coded and used that specific standard of API. So the redesigning education is not redesigning like a space or technology. It's redesigning the way people deal together, and redesigning healthcare is the same. But even redesign, for example, like a bank account is entangled with human behavior. Social systems, so, are in any project, and social system and organization, which are like entangled with social system, are something that is not done. So you can change organization, you can reshape organization, and you can reshape social system, because we know that the world is changing every day. So organizations are changing every day too. And this is something that I want to share with you. Small teams, like 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, are capable of partially redesigning organization and societies. So if 20 people, they want to change their company, they using systemic design and trying to do something better. Sometimes the butterfly effect is what we say: if I change A could have an effect on B, C, D, E, F, and even a tiny group of people with the right move can change a pretty big social system, a country, an organization. Think about Brexit, just to give you an example. And this is the end. This is the end. So the hard work of designers or of engineers, of the whole innovation teams, will generate incremental and frequent change rather than big and transformational change. Big changes are pretty unique. They are not so common. Incremental and frequent change is 90% of what we do and what we can obtain as an impact. So many relevant problems organizations face today are simple problems where stakeholders have the same values, the variables are quantified, and the solutions are pretty easy. We have best practices around us. So if we have best practice, we don't have to use systemic design or lower complexity. Systemic design is intended for situations where the value conflict, the ambiguity is there. Think about, ILVA, or places where we have to decide. We have pollution on one side of the table, and we have the rights of workers on the other side of the table. So we have a value conflict. There is a lot of ambiguity. We cannot divide, the future of iron in Italy into tiny, small problems. It's a big, complex whole. And this is where systemic design, which is the joining of design thinking and complexity thinking, it can provide a value. So just think about how much are different those stuff, like a design system and what we call in design theory systemic design. So I think I'm over. Like I'm done. It's like I will share with you the slides. It's like 6 pages of books, credits, papers, anything that you wanna. If you're interested in, if you wanna go in depth, and I'm pretty open to any question that you have for me. Maybe I don't get like your voice, or maybe it was super big and super fast. You are all muted. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. So my question is, Can you give a concrete example in your work of systemic design? Okay, sure. So I can tell you. Let me think about what we. Last year we worked with WFP. WFP is part of the United Nations. They deal with like a promise, which is zero hunger. So the core value of WFP is to provide food to everyone on the earth, to the whole humanity. So they have like an innovation accelerator in Germany, in Munich, and they started a project about redesigning like a digital touch point from schools in Madagascar, so in Africa. We were on the table just as a research company, and we were not so sure that that specific solution made on those beautiful like offices in Munich were like something valuable in the other part of the world, in a small school of Madagascar. So instead of blocking the idea, instead of quitting the project, we said, okay, let's spend a month there. Let's try to collect from the real voice of people any pain point, anything that they experience on those schools in that specific part of the world, and then let's try to combine them together in order to have like a bigger picture. And they did. Yes, let's do that. So Lorenzo, Raffaele, and other people, they went to Madagascar. They collected pictures, like they interviewed the people. They were at the schools, and we came up with like a pretty huge map of needs. And in that map of needs, the idea connected the assumptions that were behind the design or what they were doing were not there. Nobody asked it. Nobody even had anything to do with the project. So we did a pivot. We changed it totally, the scope, the outcome of the project, and we developed like a new attendance tracking system for schools. And that system is going to provide WFP the relevant information in order to forecast the supply chain of food that they want to transfer into that specific part of the world. It was like made by a generative research, and what I said before, be open. So even if you're working, even if I'm designing, let's say, an application of product A, if you're open, as soon as you get that, this is not the right way to invest our common time, you can pivot, you can change. And you can change not to dedicate to one single need. You can also change trying to combine those needs together and have the complex picture of the needs of hundreds of people who live in a specific situation. How do the stakeholders receive this content? Do you feel resistant? If so, how did you manage to overcome? So I don't talk about like systemic design to some stakeholders. I don't think that the business is ready for that. Of course, they are ready for design thinking. They love design thinking. Design thinking now is a buzzword. So we use design thinking towards the stakeholders. But what you have to realize is that sometimes they hire you to produce something specific, like, hey, can you design that to me? Sometimes they hire you because they have a need and they don't have a clear picture. So you help them, investigating that need and trying to find a solution. Some other times, the company they're closing. They're going to go to bankruptcy because it's not that they have a need. the value proposition of a company is not needed today because the world is another world. So what you can do is not just to design a service or to design a product. What you have to do is to consider the whole ecosystem and try to understand if that company can do something that has a value in that ecosystem. I think this is when like systemic design is still valid, and it's still an open question because sometimes you use your time, you do research, you try to shape a new business model, and the answer is no. There's nothing to do. That company, that organization has nothing to provide that is going to be received as a value from people. Could you again elaborate what the exact scope of systemic design is? Where does it start? Where does it end? And what do you consider its boundaries? Okay, so thank you, Helen. The boundaries are pretty connected to what we consider a system. So part of systemic design is to what we call define the field. So what are the boundaries of healthcare? We are not redesigning a hospital. We are not redesigning like the relationship between a patient and like a doctor. We are even designing, public policies. We are even designing the welfare. So any project, the beginning of any project is to define what you said before, like the boundaries. And what I can tell you is that the more complex, and by the way, I think it was clear on that. So complex and complicated, they are not synonyms. They are different words, okay? The more you feel that, for example, something that has a value for the doctor has not a value for the patient, and something that has a value for the patient that doesn't have any value for the doctor, the more you feel that you are dealing with ambiguity and with the contrast of values, the more you know that you're not designing a product or a service, but you are trying to understand a complex system. And by the way, the thing you do as a designer are different. You're not wireframing. You're not like designing a user interface on that project. Let me check if we have other questions. So Liana, KP, Ellen. As I said before, like I can like let me do that. I can give you my email so that you can contact if like I from a university point of view and from like a professional point of view, I have an incredible passion for that. So what you can do is like you can send me an email if you want like further explanation. You can ask me for references or ask me for like literature on that. I will be more than pleased to provide you, any in-depth information. But by the way, like I think the goal of this pretty like compressed webinar was to give you the meaning of this simple switch of word. Like a design system is something like pretty, it's the common stain of knowledge of a team. The systemic design is an incredible and big field. So let's say that we still have like 2 or 3 minutes for other questions. In the meantime, I want to say thank you to you all. So to Amanda, Bianca, Catherine, Clara, Ilmaz, Clement, Taban, Dominique, Ellen, KP Info, Luca Spinosi, Liana Taylor, Medrad, Peter Jacobson, and PI Anastasi. it was like a pleasure for me to discuss about something like that, outside, the gray walls of the academia. And it's still something new. It's still something that there is a pretty good conference, is RSD, the Research in Systemic Design, that every year, I think last year was in Sweden or in Norway, I don't remember, Oslo, in Norway, definitely. And you can, all the materials of the conference are free. You can access the materials, and maybe you can commit part of your time since this evening, start designing not products or artifacts or interfaces or like surfaces, but starting thinking as designers of a more complex whole. Are you going to publish a paper, dissertation, thesis? No, like I'm 40% time like a university professor and 60% time a professional. So the awful truth is that I don't commit like enough space, enough part of my time to the publication. I love to teach. I love to have the relationship with student. I'm much more in the, let's say, in the classroom side of teaching rather than in the research side of the teaching. But who knows? Like this is not something that I have in my mind for the next year. But the more experience I still collect on that field, and it could be that maybe that. But you can find a lot of papers about that. Most of them are pretty theoretical, but they are super interesting. And in the links I showed to you before, there's plenty of them. So if you wanna go in depth, even here, you're gonna find like a lot of identifying individual differences in creative problem solving, or the symposium on complexity in biological information processing. They are all good. They are all good. So thank you to everybody. It was a pleasure, and thank you to Codemotion for that possibility. I wish you like a lovely evening.